Welcome to Aces Up Your Sleeve. I'm one of your hosts, Cade,
And I'm Sabrina, your other host.
and today we're talking about autistic supervisors and just being autistic in the work world. We are here also to give, kind of advice, our thoughts on the situation, but as our usual disclaimer, it's not therapy or therapeutic advice. So join us here. We are therapists, but we're not your therapists, and we're going to be talking about autistic careers.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting one.
How many supervisory roles have you been in throughout your career? Is this like the director of operations, the first big one, or have you had other?
Probably the first big one. I was task supervisor for some interns at one of my old jobs, which was like basically I had more direct contact with them, but I wasn't an LCSW at the time, so I couldn't be their full supervisor. And so they had like another full supervisor, and then I kind of was like, hey, I see this person every day, and like, that kind of stuff. And then like less official, I've been like a clinician at practices that have interns, and so kind of helping out that way. I think that's mostly it. How about you?
Cool. Yeah, I've definitely done the like supervising some interns and volunteers, but then I was a supervisor for about a year in community mental health for the wraparound with
Mm,
intensive services.
good God.
So that was like before I was able to clinically supervise. So for listeners, like as a therapist, you have
Mhm.
to hit a certain amount of requirements and do certain trainings before you can be a clinical supervisor. So that was more like administrative supervision of like, did you get your notes done? Have you gotten your hours up? Have you done this and that? Which is kind of miserable in my opinion.
Yeah.
um, the clinical supervision is much more fun. I do that now. I don't have folks who work for me and my company, but they contract me to supervise them so they can run their own businesses or be part of group practices or community mental health. And so I get a lot of joy in that. I've been doing that for a couple years now.
Yeah, I want to go into it once I can. So in North Carolina, where I'm at, social workers just have to have 2 years post full licensure. So
Yeah.
technically, come July, I'll be able to clinically supervise. I will absolutely be doing way more training before I take on any supervisory roles in the clinical supervision sense. I think it's really, really scary that we don't require more specific training and supervision before doing that. And I know other license types do and even require supervision for being a supervisor. So, like, you have
Yeah.
a supervisor while you are supervising others. I think that's a wonderful way to do it. But yeah, so that's something I want to get into, but I actually am more in the like director of operations is more of the like, hey, like I run a note report every Monday, and like I just wrote and have been dealing with like the policies and procedures and the clinical handbook for my practice. And so yeah, it's a little bit more on the admin ish side of things.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's going to come in handy because we've got two questions, one for someone who is from someone who is a therapist and one that's a little more generic.
Okay.
We'll jump into this first one. It says, how do I work my way up in a company when I'm afraid of supervising people and the social games I might have to play? I've been at my company for 3 years. I need to make more money, so the only option is to go up the corporate ladder, but I don't think I have the people skills.
Mm. So I feel like the way that I went up was not typical, maybe is the word I'm looking for, which makes sense. My practice is run by an ADHDer. So I had been at the practice a couple months over a year when I got put onto the leadership team, which was a little bit more vague at the time. But part of the reason that I was put on the leadership team was that I'm quite systems oriented. And I take that part of social work, like the like you know, policies and systems and all that like makes a lot of sense to my brain, and I like it, and I like the kind of organization of that. I actually almost went into organizational psych all the
Oh,
way
wow.
back in undergrad, and so that was like part of that skill set is what like why I got moved up, and part of it was just that like I'm pretty active, I'm pretty sociable, I am pretty like, hey, I'm always going to answer a group message in the chat, let's go. That kind of extrovert. But I think this question is really interesting to me. One, it presupposes social games that you have to play. Don't play social games. I would never work at a job where the expectation is for me to play bullshit mind games. That wouldn't be values aligned for me. I wouldn't want to climb that
Yeah.
ladder.
It's part of why I didn't go into, like, education. I wanted to
Mhm.
be a teacher for a long time, and then I
Me
student
too.
taught and was like, "Oh, there's a lot of dynamics here that are unspoken, and it feels weird," and to be a school counselor in that system would have also been weird, so I tried to stay away from that. Sounds like this person's already in this company for 3 years, and if you're asking it, you probably are seeing that there's some
Mhm.
social dynamics that are just difficult, yeah.
So I also wanted to teach, and also had that same kind of watched it, saw it happening, things like that. And that was why I went into training instead, is because like I get to use a similar thing. Like I still miss some of the ways that like teaching you get like a whole semester and like all these things, but I don't have to do all of those kind of fucky, higher ups things. I will say, like, I think that it's going to be hard for you to try to force yourself into a role that it doesn't sound like you're even necessarily wanting just for the money. Like, I totally get the like, I need to make more money. The only option is up. And I think that there are other options that include out, which is hard. Like, that's a really hard thing to do. I don't say that lightly, especially for a place that you've been working 3 years and especially in this current job market.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's going to end up pretty shaky if you're only going up for the increased money, because likely the increased responsibilities are not what you actually want and they won't feel worth the money,
Yeah.
especially if they're like engaging with people in a way that doesn't feel values aligned to you.
When I was in the community mental health agency, I didn't actually want the supervisor role. And a few months before it opened, I had pitched a completely different idea to my supervisor. And I think he was the wrong one to pitch it to. So, as you look at your
Mm,
company and who's where and what roles and powers they have and how burnt out they are, I think I should have picked a supervisor that was less burnt out or his supervisor and just gone right to her. But again, those social
mhm,
games, it's kind of hard to know, like, is that going to be seen as disrespectful? But I had pitched something that was a lot more of personal interest to me, things that I was excelling in already, stuff that I enjoyed doing. I wanted to maybe have a role created where I could lead groups and help other clinicians lead groups because we'd just gotten a mandate from the state that said, you all need to be serving these clients X amount of hours per week, which totals to X amount of hours per month, and you all are not doing that consistently. Figure it
group is a
out.
great way. Oh, I love that. I love groups.
Yeah, so I pitched it. I was like, I know a lot of the therapists don't enjoy groups, but if you had someone whose whole job was plan and run groups and get a couple staff members on board, to help support and co-facilitate, and it doesn't have to be the people who hate groups, we could see so many more clients and get them quality care with, you know, pitched it really well, but ultimately I think the company thought it was too risky maybe, or he was just too burnt out to go higher with it even though he said he would. So I got the supervisor role, and within the first 6 months, I was like, "This cannot be. I will stick it out a year," and that's it. So if there are things in your work that you're already doing where you like it lights you up, you're excelling at that, there's not as much maybe socializing or people-y stuff that you have to do. Maybe you work retail and you want to not be around people and you could do a cool ad campaign. Maybe you love marketing or that's your hobby on the side is to learn about that stuff. Ask if you could run an ad campaign, see how well it does, track your data, your stats, go to your supervisor or higher depending on what you need and say like, can we carve out a role for this? Here is how much revenue my ad campaign appears to have brought in. I would be asking for this salary that is higher than your current salary. See what they can do, because if you were consistently bringing in more revenue, you may not have to go up higher. You could do kind of a lateral move to a different position that you're still passionate about.
Yeah. I also think like I had 4 jobs in my first 2 years out of grad school. One year I filled up 3 W-2s. It was awful. Yeah. That same year, my partner had 4 because they had like a weird summer job thing. There's a lot to be said about like finding the place that fits you really well. So, like, I had those 4 jobs in 2 years, and then in a little over 1 year, I was put on the leadership team. And I always kind of knew that I wanted to have a role in like building the program that I was working on. Like, again, my brain is kind of a little systemsy like that. And so, yeah, like Kate said, like it was very going into what is my strength. And I still love seeing my clients. Someday, if we can get it together to run some groups, I love that. I love running groups. But like, it it was a lot better once I found a place that fit really well, where it's like I can bring my ideas. I pitched a training arm and got really far with it, and like it's not working right now, but our plan is for it to work someday. I pitched new policies and procedures manual, and then I wrote it and did the thing. Like, there's something to finding a place where you can be excited about things and go for them because you're excited. I think part of this is like, okay, so you're afraid of supervising people. If you want to supervise people, but you are afraid of doing so, then I think that there are classes, like courses, classes, trainings, consultations, like there's learning from others. And then also talk to people who have been supervised. What do they like? What do they prefer? What worked well for them? What didn't? What kind of supervisor do you want to be? Like finding your identity is going to be really important.
Yeah, because if you're passionate about it and you're just worried about the skill set, or you got maybe like, hate to say it, but like imposter syndrome going on, and actually you'd be quite good in this role, you're just not recognizing it or doubting yourself, there are a lot of ways you can bolster those skills that don't involve the social games. Although I also know promotions sometimes do involve the one with the better people skills might be the one moving up, even if they don't have the hard, concrete skills that are needed. So I feel for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that, like, okay, so I'm a pretty big fan of like checking on goodness of fit. Is there a goodness of fit with the skills you have and the skills they need? So, like, if it is not like social games, like I'm taking social games to be a very like you like for shits and giggles, put people against each other and like
Oh.
create like fucky dynamics. That could be something different than what you're talking about, but just so we all know what I'm thinking of when I'm hearing social games, right? But like, if there's a goodness of fit in you and the company, if what your values are aligns well with what their values are, if what you do well aligns well with what they need, then that's going to actually work out really, really well for you to move up
Mm.
because you're going to further solidify that thing, right? And then if you find that, like, oh, I can communicate really well with these people, but not with those people, then those are the people who happen to not have a goodness of fit with the company. And it's not actually a you problem. Does that make sense? Like, I'm a very direct person. People who are not going to work well with hearing directness are not going to be a good fit inside of the company where I am a big part of who you're going to be talking to when there's an issue. And that doesn't mean anything bad about them and it doesn't mean anything bad about me. It means that there's maybe not goodness of fit here. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm like an asshole.
Right.
I'm not unkind, but that like we're going to have to be able to sit down and say, like, hey, you've not hit your numbers in 2 months. Can we talk about it? And I'm going to say it just like that. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to say it like, huh, you're a piece of shit and you're not good at your stuff. But I'm also not going to say like, oh, I can see that everything's been really hard. Maybe there are some times when you're maybe not quite hitting close to where you need to be, but like you could very easily. Like that's not going to be me either. When you are moving up, part of supervising people is being really like firm in who you are so that you can turn around and offer them that. And then they get to decide, yep, this meets exactly what I'm needing right now. Or nope, this is not the way that I can be supervised. And either end up with a different supervisor or at a different company. If your way of being and your values are a good fit for the company, because you also could be the odd man out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard in this job market, but the other conversation we could have is what do you do if you find out you're not the best fit at that company, or that some of these like warning signs about moving up, that you're feeling that nervousness or worry or anxiety, maybe listen to those. Maybe there's something about this company or the people that are working there right now that it's going to be make it like miserable for you or difficult for you. It is hard
Yeah.
when the unemployment rates are so high, especially if you're in America. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I do think that like I actually talked about it on a different episode, but there's a really, really good book called Radical Candor, which is about managing people. Kate is laughing at me because I can't stop talking about this book, but it was very good. Finding books about managing and about like how to like this isn't a thing that it's just like, well, because it's time for a raise and because it's time for a promotion, I'm going to be supervising people, so let me just go do that. It's a skill. It's a thing that people go to school for. They get
Yeah.
degrees in this. It is okay to say, I need more training. It's okay to go out and get that training. It is then okay to say, like, hey, I'm trained in this and would like to be doing it as part of my job.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next one is from a therapist, I'm assuming, because they say, I supervise therapists at a mental health agency and I'm
I hope
brand
it's
new to
from a
this.
therapist.
Though I've met some where it's purely administrative supervision, and for some reason they think they don't need a therapist in that role, and that other people will understand the nuances. But they say I supervise therapists at a mental health agency, and I'm brand new to this. Do you two have any tips for me? How can I keep everything organized? How do I make sure everyone understands me and that I'm understanding them?
Mm.
I
What
wonder
are
if there's a
what
little like double empathy stuff at play too in that last part of the question on how do I understand and make sure, people understand me.
I was thinking perfectionism.
Could be.
Everyone has to understand you and you have to understand them every time. It's not going to be that that's going to happen. You're going to have misunderstandings. It's about how do you clear them up,
Yeah. And how do
you
you
know?
check on whether they're understanding you or not, instead
Right.
of assuming every time everyone is? I think the check-in can help because then even if they're not, or there is some double empathy, which, is where autistic to autistic communication doesn't have too many misunderstandings when compared to non-autistic communication. But when we do the cross neurotype, more misunderstandings arise. Yeah.
Yeah, I think checking in, but I also think a lot of that comes with like again, kind of assumptions of, well, yeah, anyone who communicated this way was trying to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
It's the like all or nothing kinds of things.
So making space for a lot of different communication styles. When I got promoted into the supervisory role in those first few meetings where I'm meeting my new supervisees who were colleagues, now there is like a power dynamic asking, how do you prefer to be communicated with? Like if there is a problem with productivity or with your notes or with something, how do you want me to bring that to you? What if it's like an interpersonal thing that I'm having to talk to you about between you and other colleagues or supervisors? And then what's the best way for reminders, follow up? Do you appreciate that? Do you need something in between our next meeting? What does that look like? Just getting really curious about their style and letting them know yours, and then figuring out accommodations if you both have really different needs or abilities.
Yeah, I think especially that, right? Like noticing where there's like mismatches. Like I'm a much more verbal person. Like written communication gets really confusing and overwhelming and like frustrating for me also because of the like delay. The
Mm-hmm.
like what everyone's like, "Oh, this meeting could have been an email." And I'm like, "Yeah, an email that lasted like an email chain that lasted 2 weeks versus a meeting that lasted 30 minutes. Like what are we talking about here? Even a 2-hour meeting is better than 2 weeks in my book. And so like if you're talking with someone who's like, "No, I want everything written. I can't do verbal." Okay, what are we going to do to find that middle ground because your needs don't get swept away based on the needs of the other person, no matter who that person is. But
Yeah.
neither do their needs get swept away by yours, right? And so, like, finding as much as you can that middle ground. And maybe that's you meet verbally and then send a follow up email and then give them lots of opportunities to follow up after the
Mhm.
fact with questions that they maybe didn't think to ask or with, oh, now that I've thought about it, I don't like how we did that. Like, allowing for change.
Yeah, and the processing time can be important too. And I think as you start having those conversations and testing out what works, that'll help you create some systems, which can help you organize things as well. If you've got you say you're working with therapists, so I assume some notes and productivity is among the things that you'll need to keep track of, figuring out from your boss or from the company, what are those key things I need to know for each of my supervisees, and how can I formulate something to keep track of that and that we can touch base on. I used to bring like a little agenda to the supervision meetings, especially when they're not very clinical and there's not a lot of case consultation. So the first few things we'd jump into, unless there was some emergency, would be here were your hours for the last week or month. Here's how the note completion's going. What have been some barriers to hitting that? Or hey, great, you hit the stuff. Has that been going well? What are you noticing? Any accommodations that are needed? Really exploring the stuff we had to explore first and foremost, so that if the meeting gets cut short or somebody's got to go, at least we did what's by the book required, and then we can jump into, is there anything else I can support them in? So you'll find your own structure as you get to know one, what's required of you, and then two, what each supervisee actually needs.
Starting to, my dietitian starts every one of our meetings with what's been going well,
Mm.
which I think is kind of nice. Like it takes a little bit of that pressure off, especially if you are more of an admin role. Like, and then kind of consistency. So like for a while, I was doing monthly 30-minute check-ins with all of our staff. And it was partially to get a little bit more of like one-on-one connection, like, hey, it's just me. Like, I'm director of operations, is a big scary title, but like it is just me. And we can talk about things. And also it gave an opportunity, if there are things that I need to talk to you about, we can do that in this space. And it doesn't have to be some punitive, hey, we need to have a meeting and now you're in a panic. No, it's just, this is your monthly meeting that was coming up anyway. And we need to talk about some stuff. But also, it gave them opportunities to talk about stuff. And sometimes we met, and literally, I have talked to clinicians just about like, how are your kids transitioning to school? How are like having time, especially if you're virtual, which I
Mhm.
don't, it doesn't sound like you necessarily are. Um, but especially if you're meeting virtually with folks or if some of your staff is primarily virtual, like we don't have the same way of connecting in the hallway or over lunch or, oh, hey, let me pop my head into your office for a quick like 5-minute rundown of something. And so we actually often miss out on like the humanity building um that
Yeah.
like in-person folks do. And so I really like the kind of like having a really consistent time to meet. We're moving in my practice to more of, I'm every third month, our biller is every third month, and then our clinical director is every third month, but there's still a monthly meeting for our clinicians, um, depending on who that person is. And yeah, I think that that can be really helpful in just like figuring out, okay, how are we making sure that everyone has the space to talk about things and that we can talk about especially admin things that might come up. um, from a like organization standpoint, I'm a Google Drive bitch.
Yeah.
Oh man, is it so fucking nice and easy because you can color code. Like when I was in supervision, I had a Google Drive. So I mentioned I had 4 different jobs, so 4 different supervisors. um had a Google Drive for each job and supervisor that had the 6-month review, that had all the paperwork copies that were signed, that had the supervision contract, that had a chart of all my hours, that I would just share with them, color coded, everything's organized. That like having something, and you can even kind of have each supervisee be the one to build it and then share it with you. So you're not necessarily managing every single piece of documentation um, that they need. They're learning the skill of how to do that for themselves.
Yeah, I definitely do some of that Google Drive type stuff with the folks I clinically supervise now because we are all virtual, especially. So they
Mhm.
each have their hours spreadsheet and their CEUs has a little page on that. Like everything that they need to get that full clinical licensure is on there. There's even like an optional sheet where they can kind of jot down what we discussed. But I also take notes of what we discussed. There's a lawyer in Washington named Eric Strom, and he's got a little bit of a template that he sends out with his trainings of here's what you should cover in case you ever get audited or complained against for your license. That way, everything is there. And so, if you're clinically supervising people, you might want to bulk up on the notes that you're taking about that supervision. If it's more the admin side, then, the proof that you're doing your job and you are having your meetings might be enough.
Yeah. From that understanding standpoint too, like an anonymous feedback form can go a long way. Like again, this can also be kept in a Google Drive. It can be a Google form that you make. It allows you to have anonymous feedback that just offers space. I will say, like, asking folks for like if they happen to have solutions that they're thinking of already. So having some space for that. It's not my favorite always to require that. I think that sometimes it can be frustrating for people to continually hear um like challenging feedback or constructive feedback that then doesn't have a solution because it's like, well, you should solve it, but it's like also, but like your job as a supervisor is to solve problems sometimes. um but having some kind of way that someone can basically anonymously tell you, like, I continually do not understand what you mean. I do what I think you want me to do, and then you tell me that I'm not doing it right. And that will highlight for you, oh, there is someone, at least one, who does not understand what I'm saying. Um, and then that can be addressed in some way.
And it might be a helpful first step before they go right to HR and say, I'm having problems with my supervisor. You can
Yeah.
also absolutely encourage live feedback, but sometimes it is easier for someone to type it or submit it anonymously. The hard part with the anonymous is you don't know which one that you're supervising said that. So then you're going to have to check in, but maybe that's what they want is for you to start the conversation. So,
Yes. Yeah. You can't get mad at me, Kate. This was the perfect topic for this book. So in the book that I read, the Radical Candor book, he's laughing at me
yeah,
again.
this is supervision. Yeah, it's very related to the book.
It
Yeah.
is very related. The author talks about like it is your job to bring the things up. That like you need to be able to make that space and bring things to the forefront. And then also that like creating an environment that encourages direct challenge and direct feedback to you, and not just feedback but challenging feedback, is paramount. So going up to your supervisees and saying, what could I have done better last week? Apparently, so this person, the author, used to work at Apple, and I guess Steve Jobs would just like come in and be like, tell me what I got wrong. Like, tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what I'm doing wrong right now. And would get really upset with people if they didn't do a like full throated defense of their perspective, because
Mm.
it was like, okay, but you're letting us maybe fuck up and I don't want us to fuck up. So if you can convince me that we should do something different, I want you to put the effort into doing that. And so I think that like there's something really powerful in a offering direct feedback that is full of personal care for the other person, but that doesn't shy away from your notes cannot continue to be as late as they currently are. So what are we going to do? It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be, like a personal attack on somebody, right? This is not, you're a late, lazy piece of shit. This is your notes cannot continue to be this late. So what are we going to do about it? But that also teaches them that like this is an environment where if you come in and say, "Hey, supervisor, you've been late to the last 3 of our meetings and that doesn't feel good to me." Oh shit. Yeah, I have. I will absolutely work on that. It's not fair or respectful of your time. That like building an environment where you directly ask for feedback and directly offer it helps people learn that that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely. Another thing you could do is ask other supervisors at the agency for feedback if you've got some who are who've been there for a while and have been in this similar role, or your supervisor if they used to be in that role, checking in like what have you found that works well for you to keep track of everything or to keep engaged with your supervisees. They might have some helpful feedback. They might also tell you, well, I know what not to do, here's some things that blew up on me. And then I think final thought on this one is just that if it is virtual, sometimes that rapport, that hallway talk, since we can't really have that, maybe sending some emails like, hey, saw this training, thought of you, or hey, there's this book that just came out that is related to what we discussed last week. If you want to listen in, here's a YouTube video that summarizes it, or whatever. I find a
Yeah.
lot of my supervisees appreciate, kind of like our clients, being remembered in between our meetings.
Yeah. And especially like they don't have a lot of money. Give them free access to the shit you have. Like,
Yeah.
my supervisor gave me so many. She even gave me like a physical big ass binder of shit um to look at for my licensure exam.
Yeah.
Like allow things to be free flowing, because that's kind of, I hope, why you got into this, right? Is like to share your knowledge and your resources, make other people pay for it, give it to your supervisees for free, right? That like
Yeah.
they're trying really hard to do good work. um and I think that like that will also build a lot of respect and trust and care.
I hope you all have found some of this advice useful. We'd love to hear your suggestions too. If anybody wants to leave some comments about what's worked for them in the work
Yeah,
world and moving up or supervising people.
absolutely, especially if you found good ways to support people with documentation. I think that's, as therapists, one of the number one things that people really struggle with, especially like autistic, ADHD folks with like, okay, what do I put in here? What do I not? Especially for insurance and all this stuff. Like, it's really hard and there's not enough good trainings out there on it. I know My friend Jill over at Mental Health Masterminds has some good trainings on it. But, um, if you've got tips and tricks, if you're a seasoned therapist, yeah, throw them in the comments. People need to know.
Well, that's about it from us today here on the main episode, but we will head over and do a little bit of bonus content, talking about this stuff a little deeper. You can expect new episodes weekly on Tuesdays from us, and you can find me over at Cryptid Learns on social media or cryptidlearns.com. And Sabrina's at Radical Insights Consulting on Facebook or Instagram, or you add a .com at the end of that, and that's her website. You can sign up for her mailing list there as well. If you have any questions for us, visit neurokink.org/AUYS and you can send it to us so we can answer your stuff. And yeah, we're going to jump over there to Patreon to record some Upping the Ante, which is our exclusive bonus content. So you can find that at patreon.com/acesupyoursleeve podcast.